I'm Tracy Mulligan, and today I'm going to be taking a walk around Zilker Park in Austin, Texas, and we are going to be looking at some plants and structures that they have that help them survive in the environment around Ladybird Lake. If we're lucky, we may see a few animals, and we'll stop and have a look at them as well. Let's go. There's a lot of poison ivy here around the trail. It just grows and climbs up the trees. Poison ivy has a toxin in it, which is very much an irritant to people. Many people are allergic to it. If you touch it, you'll get a nasty rash. So people and some animals tend to avoid this plant, which helps us survive and thrive. Here we have an agave plant, pretty common around this area. And you can see it has some sharp spines on it, and that's to protect it and keep people away from it. And so you want to be real careful when you're next to it. It also has very, very sharp, pointy tips, which hurt if you get up next to them. It also has a tough, leathery leaf, which helps keep the water in. So we have a lot of dry weather here in Austin, Texas, and that's going to help this plant survive those really, really dry, extreme months, because this tough, leathery leaf is going to keep as much moisture into the plant as possible. So check out this plant. This is a vining plant, and these plants put out these little tendrils which they use to wrap around things, and I can't remember what this plant's called, but they grow up trees and can actually even cause harm to the tree. They can get so thick. But they twist those little tendrils around branches and climb up the tree. So that is an adaptation that this plant has that helps it get up there into the tree branches and gets light so that it can survive and reproduce. It can be kind of pesky, but it is well adapted to climbing because of these little twisty, windy tendrils. Here's some that you can see that have twisted up, and they just wrap around the branches to help it climb. Here's a good example of poison ivy climbing up a tree, and you can see the little root-like vines that it sends up and attaches to the tree, and that helps it climb up and get more sunlight. The tree supports it. Remember, leaves of three, leave me be. Here's a plant that's often confused with poison ivy. It's called a Virginia creeper. And notice how many leaves this plant has. This plant has leaves in clusters of 5. But you can see here how it attaches to the tree. It has these little finger-like things that come out from the vine and cling onto the bark of the tree, and that allows the plant to climb up higher and get more sunlight. So that is an adaptation that helps this plant survive in its environment. One of my favorite things about spring in Central Texas are the wildflowers, and as you can see here at the park, there are a lot of bluebonnets and Indian paintbrush that are blooming. These plants, as many others, have brightly colored flowers, which are structures that help plants reproduce. And the brightly colored flowers will help attract helper animals, such as hummingbirds and butterflies and bees and wasps, who will walk around on the flowers to drink the nectar. And as they do that, they will spread the pollen from flower to flower, and that helps the plants make seeds, which in turn helps them make more flowers. So guys, it's another climbing plant. This, I think, is a wild grape. And it too climbed up the branches of trees so it can get more sunlight. It can actually choke out a tree. So you can see some little baby grapes there. Here we can see some of those little twisty tendrils that help the grape plant cling onto the tree branch. There, see if you can see that. Don't know if that's in focus very well. Like little twist ties on bread packages. Here are some red-eared slider turtles, and they have special structures that help them survive, namely that thick, heavy shell, but unlike land turtles, the shell is flattened, and that'll help them move through the water much easier. And their feet are shaped more like paddles. Just like when you go swimming, you will cup your hands so that you can push through the water. These turtles have paddle-like feet that help them push through the water and swim faster. This is a type of palm, and it is well adapted to living in dry environments. Notice how thin the leaves are, and that helps keep the water from evaporating from the plant. It also has very sharp little pointy things on the end to keep animals from eating it. But it also has very, very tough, leathery leaves so that the water won't evaporate. It holds the water inside the plant for those dry summer months when we get barely any rain. These are elephant ear plants, and you'll find them a lot in areas that are really moist and wet, usually shady too. They have big leaves that help capture as much sunlight as they possibly can. You can see this one's got a little bit of sunlight shining on it, but it's also a lot in the shade. They have really good roots to help them hold themselves in place along the lake, along the edges of the lake. Also, these leaves help them drip off water. So when the dew lands on this in the morning, the way the leaves are shaped is the water will just drip right off, and that way the leaf doesn't get mold or rot. This is a cypress tree, and they live next to, or actually partially in the water. And you can see it has very, very strong supportive roots at the base of the tree. This tree it's adapted that root system to help hold it in place in that wet environment, because the soil here is kind of mushy, and a tree this big would easily fall over if it didn't have a strong root system to hold it in place. And so you can see how the base of this tree gets really fat, and the roots start to spread out and give it lots of support, kind of like a big elephant foot. There's a duck down there, and he is preening his feathers. They do this because it releases oil from their skin that they use to coat their body. So that helps them stay dry when they're in the water, and also helps them with their floating a little bit, I think. And when you look at the feathers up close and the water gets on it, just kind of rolls off like a good wax job on a car. He's also really dark colored, so he camouflages real well against the dark surface of the water. Well, as you can hear, these geese are very noisy. Geese have thick feathers like ducks do. They coat in an oil that helps keep them dry when they're in the water. They also have paddle-shaped or webbed-shaped toes, which help them move through the water very quickly to catch their food or to escape from predators. These animals are well adapted to living in the water. I came down here close to the water. You can really see the roots of these trees here, and how they're wound into the soil to help hold the trees in place, because it's right here on the water's edge. This tree's actually leaned over. Looks like it could fall over, but see, it's got these really, really strong roots that are like tying it to the bank, to the soil, so it doesn't fall in. Every now and then they do fall in though. I've seen some trees laying in the water on my walk. Here is another climbing plant called a Wisteria. Now this one has beautiful purple flowers on it, and they smell fantastic. And that will attract bees and butterflies to them. Remember, the helper animals will help them spread their pollen. But like some of the other climbing plants we have seen today, they can't really support themselves. They have to climb up something. This one happens to be climbing up the tree for support, because their stems don't really give them good support. The tree has a really thick stem that gives it strong support, but climbers like the Wisteria have really long and kind of flimsy stems. This plant has a very prickly stem and it will attach to your socks. I bet you guys have experienced this before sometime walking through the weeds at the park. When I touch it with my finger, it actually is very sticky and it wants to stick to my fingers. It has these little seed pods on it that have little prickly things on it that stick to your socks, stick to my dog. My dog gets these all over them. And that structure helps the plant reproduce by allowing its seeds to be transported from one place to another. See those little sticker burrs in the stems will stick onto your socks really good. And that way when I walk somewhere else, those seeds may come off on my sock and plant in the soil and start a new plant. Well, that's it for our walk today. We made it all the way around Ladybird Lake, about 3 miles. And it's beautiful out here today, so it was really enjoyable. And we got to see some different kinds of plants and identify structures on them that help them survive. We saw a lot of climbing plants, didn't we? We saw some poison ivy and some Virginia creeper and some wisteria. The thing about climbing plants is they don't have a really strong stem, and so they have to attach to other things like trees and buildings and things like that to give them structure and support. So they attach to those things so they climb up and get more sunlight, and this helps them survive and reproduce. Remember the old saying, leaves of 3, leave me be. If you don't know something, if something is poisonous, just the best rule of thumb is don't touch it. We saw some animals. We saw ducks and geese and some turtles, and talked about how they are adapted to live in the water environment here at Ladybird Lake. They have, water animals tend to have paddle-shaped feet or appendages that help them swim through the water quickly to catch food or to escape predators. And we saw that on both the turtles and the ducks and the geese.